Everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for taking the time to purchase and support. And welcome to the 11th book in the Biblical Bible series, which is First Kings, which is basically really a part of First and Second Samuel. When you understand how it was originally written, it was all one book. So they just broke it up basically four parts, but it was called Kings, the Book of Kings. So it's all the same, really. But First Kings, we had at the end of Second Samuel. Dave's getting old, and he's at the end of his rule. He had just come out of basically having a bunch of Hebrew Israelites killed, 70,000, because he or Satan was told to number Israel. So First Chronicles I read, Satan tells him. We read in Second Samuel, it's God. But contradiction nonetheless, that's going to make sense later. We'll get into that. But it starts off with David narrating the end of his life. And he has a son, Adoniah, or Adonijah, however you want to pronounce it, who's basically trying to capture the moment and steal the throne for himself away from Solomon. So Adonijah, or Adoniah, he gets support from Joab, which remember Joab, or Joab, however you want to pronounce it, was David's commander. Joab is the one who basically was killing everybody. So Joab basically sides with Adonijah, and they conspire to steal the throne from Solomon. So Nathan, the prophet, gets wind of it. He goes and tells Bathsheba. Remember, Bathsheba is the one that was bathing, and King David saw her. She was married to Uriah, and he had a baby with her. Remember, the first baby died. The second baby was Solomon. So Adoniah, he's trying to steal the throne. They find out about it. They run to David and, tell David what's going on. So David, before he dies, he go ahead and have the whole ceremony with the priest to tell him to go ahead, hey, make sure Solomon rules, anoint Solomon as the next ruler. So Adoniah is basically like, damn. So what Solomon does, once he becomes king, he cleans house. Solomon is not playing. He kills. Remember, Joab been riding with David for a long time, the whole thing. Kills Joab and everybody else who conspired with them to kill him. Now his brother Adonijah, he spares him. He tells him, we cool, my brother. I'm not gonna kill you. Just basically chill out. Stop trying to steal the throne from me. Everything gonna be straight. So before Solomon was king, what David did, David was getting old, and of course he getting old. His wife's getting old. So. He wanted a younger wife. So he basically takes this young woman as his concubine, and she's young. She's basically there to just, make him feel good until he died. So once he's dead and Solomon is king, as I said before in 2 Samuel, when a king passes, kingdom down to another king, everything that was that king when he dies automatically goes, to the new king. Makes sense, right? He's dead. He don't need it no more. So that includes his concubines. So Adoniah, who basically promised not to do anything, he sees an opportunity, and he basically goes to Bathsheba and tries to convince her. He convinces her, hey, I want to marry David's widow. He's thinking, if I marry her, then the people will kind of sort of see me as the rightful ruler. And Solomon was like, yo, dude, I told you to chill out. So when he finds out that this dude is trying to marry her to try to make himself look like he's the rightful king and have people look at him as a king because he's married to her, Solomon's like, you know what? I warned you, you're dead. Kills him. Has him killed. And this is how it begins with Solomon. Solomon cleans house, and God looks at him completely different, because one of the things Solomon does differently from everybody else, he asks God for wisdom. Like, everybody's messing up. Give me the wisdom. Forget everything else. The one thing he asks for is the wisdom so he can know how to rule. So God grants him this super wisdom that you would think would carry him, in a rightful place, but it doesn't, as you'll see. So since, Solomon, this guy's dude, he's asking for wisdom, and he's asking for what he needs to ask for to be a good servant of God. So God gives him, not only wisdom, money and everything, So Solomon basically unites everybody, kicks all the the prostitutes and all the stuff that's going wrong in Israel out, and he kind of puts things in order. So remember, God tells David that his son will basically build his temple, and God comes to Solomon in a couple dreams and tells him, hey dude, if you basically be as good as your pop and you follow my commandments and you be good, you're going to build my temple and I'll dwell there. He comes to visit Solomon a couple times. David also tells Solomon on his deathbed right before he died, pulls Solomon over and tells Solomon, hey man, follow the commandments, lead the people straight, don't sin against God, and told him basically what to do because God ain't playing no games, he'll kill you. And Solomon was like, yeah, okay, I get it. So, God comes to the dream, tells him, Solomon has this information, he know what he needs to do, just like the rest of the guys when you really understand. But, we'll get into what happens. But first things first, we all know Solomon from Solomon's temple. And Solomon builds this temple. And when he builds the temple, he becomes famous. Solomon becomes super famous. Everybody knows Solomon. Now, supposedly this temple was built 1000 BCE, destroyed by the Babylonians in the 6th century BCE, which no proof of Solomon's temple. Nobody can prove it was ever built, so on and so forth. We understand this. But to the story, builds this temple, becomes famous, everybody knows him, and again, nobody outside the Bible mentions this dude, so of course he's just made for the Bible, as we'll get into in a second. So one of the things Solomon does ask God for, that God did like, is that everybody who came from outside of Israel, everybody who came to worship at the temple, because it was supposed to be so magnificent and everybody was hearing stories about it, everybody who comes to the temple, he asks God to basically bless them and forgive them for their sins against him. Now it says here, it's 1 Kings 8. I'll start here at 49. It says, then hear thou their prayer and their supplication in heaven, thy dwelling place, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people that have sinned against thee, and all their transgressions wherein they have transgressed against thee, and give them compassion before them who carried them captive, that they may have compassion on them. For they be thy people, and thy people inheritance, which thou broughtest forth out of Egypt from the midst of the furnace of iron, that thine eyes may be open unto the supplication of thy servant, and unto the supplication of thy people Israel, to hearken unto them in all that they call for unto thee. For thou didst separate them from amongst all the people of the earth, to be thy inheritance, as thou spakest by the hand of Moses thy servant, when thou broughtest our fathers out of Egypt, O Lord God. And it was so that when Solomon had made an end of praying all this prayer and supplications unto the Lord, he arose from before the altar of the Lord, from kneeling on his knees, okay, how else do you kneel, with his hands spread up to heaven, and he stood and blessed all the congregation of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord that hath given rest unto his people Israel, according to all that he promised, that have not failed one word of all his good promise, which he promised by the hand of Moses his servant. The Lord our God be with us, as he was with our fathers. Let him not leave us nor forsake us. And when you continue reading and you go on reading, it's giving you every single understanding that the people understand who God is and what God has done for them, that they understand the history, they know the power, they have witnessed it, they have seen it. Why would you continue to sin? So you have Solomon getting into all this. Forgive the people, because remember, people scattered, and you got other people who went off and set up kingdoms, other people who went on to other kingdoms that worship other gods and mixed them with them, but they're still supposed to be all from God's people who supposedly was, let out of Egypt. So he's saying, I know they're going against you, but they still your people, even though they were other people. Bless them when they come here, and forgive them and answer their prayers when they come here, because they technically still your people. So gives the prayer. The people acknowledge it, and the temple is built, and they go into the building of King Solomon's temple, which we will not touch on because it's just verse after verse after verse. I mean, they list all kinds of equipment and things that was used to build Solomon's temple, measurements and so on and so forth. It's a bunch of bullshit for something that was never built, plain and simple. So this is what's happening in the beginning of First Kings. So quick recap: Solomon, king now, kills basically everybody from fucking Second Samuel. They dead. He leading a new group of people. They with him. They following him. He's stinking rich. He's famous. Everything is going well with Solomon. Now, the biggest part about this, of course, is the Freemasonry part of this. Who is King Solomon? What does King Solomon have to do with Freemasonry? So, the master builder of the Temple of Solomon was Hiram Abiff, as they call him. Now, what are the things when you really understand how elaborate King Solomon's temple was supposed to have been, and that we understand that Masons are builders, and that coded within Masonry is the knowledge of the universe, the knowledge of building, math, science, geometry, so on and so forth. For you to build in the way that these people are building goes back to the ancient Egyptians and how they built to mimic, the universe, the stars, the heavens, what was in space. So as above, so below. So all of that is intertwined with Masonry, and Hiram Abiff was a Mason who overseen the building of Solomon's temple, which was supposed to be amazing. So every candidate that enters into the third degree of Freemasonry is told the story of Hiram Abiff, which have many different, stories. It's different stories, but basically it goes: Hiram Abiff, master builder, was building, and three supposed Masons, they basically, ambushed him and tried to force him to tell the secrets to Masonry, the next level. Give me the master words and tell me the secrets, and then give me the knowledge of what's going on. And Hiram Abiff stays silent, until death. First man hits him, second man hits him, third man kills him. That's how the story goes. And he dies, and the key to the story, the main point they're trying to make is fidelity. Is keeping the secret under penalty of death, that you can be put right here, right now, on the spot, have your life threatened, and basically be beaten and being in pain and fear, of dying, but yet you don't give up anything. You say nothing. You take death over dishonor. You take death over revealing the secrets. You die to keep the secrets of Masonry. And that's the story of Hiram Abiff and what they try to, give to the Master Masons, to the third degree initiates of Freemasonry. So it's a lot more into that, which we'll touch on at some point. But this is, the story of Hiram Abiff, and it goes into Masonry, and it's a lot dealing with that as well. So what is the whole thing? I mean, we know King Solomon's temple. So what is it? King Solomon's temple was supposed to house the Ark of the Covenant. And that's one of the things we got to beat up first, so you can understand the Ark of the Covenant and what that's about. Because a lot of people, when they dig into Freemasonry, they understand, okay, y'all own King Solomon's temple, Hiram Abiff. What is up with all that? What is the power in it? One, understanding as a Mason, they look at it and say, well, it's the knowledge of, math and all that built into the temple. So it's a lot of esoteric stuff in that. But then religious people look at it and say, well, we're talking about the place where the Ark of the Covenant was housed, where God said himself that he's going to dwell. So what is up with that? The Ark of the Covenant. And when you really get into this thing, you're talking about almost most of the Old Testament we've been reading so far. They carry an Ark of the Covenant. An Ark of the Covenant is supposed to contain the rod of Aaron, supposedly, the tablets, the law of Moses, the laws, and a jar of manna. So we know they're carrying this ark around, it's giving them powers and all this kind of stuff like that. But we also know 100% for sure they stole the ark from Egypt. The description of the ark fits exactly the reliefs that we see in Egypt that's in stone. Long before anything biblical, we have these arks, which they're called barks. Well, you understand, you have ark, you have bark. The sacred bark. So when you look at these, and I'm just going to read here so it's more clear to you to understand what this stuff is about. So now it says here, found on Seti I's mortuary temple in Cuma, and the bark of Horus, which, understand real quick, the bark you have a sacred bark, and it's ark. It's like a boat, and they carrying it, and you have it covered in gold. Either it's going to be a god inside the bark, or it's going to be a person's remains inside the bark that they use and they carry for basically like a spiritual festival, which we're going to talk about in a second. Now, it says here, and the bark of Horus in the temple of Ifu. Like the Ark of the Covenant, sacred barks were carried on poles by priests, the so-called pure ones, who had performed purification rituals in order to hoist the bark. Though most Egyptian rituals were never witnessed by the public, the procession of the sacred bark was an important exception. It was the focus of an intense series of festivals throughout the year, as many as 5 to 10 per month, which involved loud music and dancing. You see the same thing in China. During the celebration, priests carried the bark from one shrine to another and made stops along the way, during which they dramatized mythological scenes. The route and length of the procession varied depending on the gods they carried and their mythologies. The bark also gave oracles. While resting at one of the stations, it could be consulted by written oracles, and while en route during the procession, it could be asked a question to which it will respond yes or no by bowing fore or aft. Some priests marched before the bark, wafting incense, and others alongside and behind. Some bore standards representing gnomes, much like the tribal procession of the Ark of the Covenant. While I know of no sacred bark whose footstool contained relics. And real quick, the lid that's on the Ark of the Covenant is called the Throne of God, and the box is called the Footstool of God, which you'll understand why in a second. While I know of no sacred bark whose footstool contained relics, the placing of oaths beneath the feet of the statues is attested. Thus, in a letter from Ramses II to the Hittite king Hattusilus III, we find the following reference. The writing of the covenant that I made to the great king, and which the king of Hattu has made with me, lies beneath the feet of the god Ra. The great gods are witnesses to it. Scholars have long linked this practice to the placing of the covenantal tablets in the ark's footstool. You see where they got it from. They stole it from exactly where we know they stole it from, Kemet. And they're trying to make this whole holy connection that had something to do with the tablets and Moses and all this and that, when it has something to do with it's Egyptian. Plain and simple, we all understand this. In addition, from the 18th dynasty well into the Roman period, Egyptians fashioned statues of the god Ptah, so-called Osiris, standing upright on their own coffins. Of interest here is that the coffins often house copies of the Book of the Dead or small corn mummies. While the Ramesside letter and statue are not exact parallels to the Ark, they share the concept of text placing beneath the feet of God. Like their divine counterparts, funerary barks function as a means of transport and mythological invocation. However, rather than transport images, they ferry the deceased to their tombs. That's, as I said, was bodies in there. Just like we see in China when there's a funeral, it's the same way. They're carrying these barks, and it's the body that's in there, and you see it's a whole festival. It's the same stuff. They got it from Kemet, and we understand how the cultures mimic each other when we see this stuff, but a lot of people can't point it out because they're not looking. Where do you think we get it from today? If you pay attention to funerals today, we carry the coffins. It's symbolic of what they used to do back in ancient times, carrying a sacred bark with the body in it. We still do that to this day. This is where they got it from. It's clear as day. We carry the pine box, wood, your coffin, pallbearers. It all goes back to ancient times. It all goes back to ancient Kemet, where they stole the whole idea of this from, or where they copied it from. And we see it in ancient China. We see it in China today. And we see it in a lot of funeral processions. And this is where it came from. As in the festivals, loud music accompanied burial processions. These processions too were public, though the number of attendees naturally varied. The bark's trip to the tomb invoked the journey of the sun, important of the sun, as it sailed to the land of the west, like Ra and his solar bark, which is what all of this is about. We'll see in a second. But the deceased hoped to sail on the cycle of renewal, important, and emerge with him at dawn. This is big. And I love when I read stuff like this, and it's clear as day what they're saying. And you got to understand what the stuff is about and what's being said in Solomon, because it's about one thing: the sun. The whole procession, everything that we're reading about this bark has to do with the cycle. It's about reincarnation. You have seen many reliefs of Egyptians on their solar boat, on a boat. When you see the boat with the stars, it's giving you the reference of them traveling through space. That's what it's about. Solar bark, ark. Noah's Ark, which was a boat. It's giving you that reference. We see the boats. This is all tied in together, has to do with the sun. Now, of course, we know they got it from Egypt. And the good thing about it is, I talked about this before, Indiana Jones is telling you that clear as day. When you've seen the movie, they never go to Israel. They're looking for the Ark of the Covenant, and they go to Egypt. Where do they find the damn Ark? In Egypt. Not only do they find it in Egypt, they find it encased Egyptian shit everywhere. Look at the statues. Look at them legs, black. They're giving it to you because I told you they have to tell you the truth. They have to show you what's real. The Ark of the Covenant is nothing more than a bark, the sacred bark from Egypt. Exactly where they found it at on Indiana Jones the movie, and this is where they copied it from. Plain and simple. That's an easy one. But you got to understand what all of this is pertaining to and what Solomon really is. Forget the story. The story is to get you wrapped up in a bunch of mumbo jumbo shit that never happened. But when they tied it to Freemasonry with Hiram Abiff, it's a reason for this, and it's all esoteric. Now remember, the Egyptians dealt with the sun. Plain and simple. Everything is about the sun. Jesus is the sun. You go to church on Sunday, it's sun worship. Jesus is the sun. God is the sun. Everything, and understand this, everything involving Solomon has to do with the sun and the moon. It has to do with reincarnation, birth, sex, so on and so forth. Everything that will be entailed in reincarnation, the cycle of life and death and birth. This is what Solomon is all about. We already know his name, Solomon. And you heard this from Jordan Maxwell. If you follow Jordan Maxwell, he talked about this in one of his previous videos. You have Sol, which is sun. Om, the priest of Om, which has to do with the sun. And On is the city of Heliopolis, which is in Egypt, which is the city of the sun. So Solomon, Solomon's name, has to do with the sun. But then you have Solomon, which has to do with Sol, moon, sun and moon. You have soul of man, Solomon, soul of man, soul of man. It has to do with the soul. Everything involving Solomon has to do with the sun. Plain and simple, there's no way around that. And they're giving that to you when you really understand. Now, Solomon's temple housed the Ark of the Covenant. And as we just talked about, the Egyptians basically had the solar bark, which basically is representing the gods passing to another phase of existence, or a person passing through the procession of the sun, which would be like the procession of reincarnation, them coming back or them moving forward. If there was a god, they was moving forward. If there was a person, they was probably going back through the cycle. So this is what it's about. The Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's temple. So as I said, Solomon also deals with sex, the sex act. So when you look at the blueprints for Solomon's temple, a lot of people pointed this out, including Jordan Maxwell, is you have the phallus going into the woman. So the penis going into the pussy. When you pay attention and look at it, that's what it's showing you. It's a phallic. It's going into the woman's womb. This is what it's about. Has to deal with reincarnation, the sex act. This is why Solomon had so many wives, because they tried to pound that home. Dude had 1,000 girls, 1,000. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. What you think was going on? Who needs that many? They wanted to pound it home what's really going on and what this stuff is really talking about. It's talking about reincarnation. It's talking about the sex act, and the sex act is the beginning of reincarnation. It is the initiator of what's going to be happening with the energies combining and the process of reincarnation happening, or the process in which a person can come back to this planet via reincarnation, via the body. So go again to Jesus talking to Nicodemus, saying to Nicodemus, hey, only way you can see kingdom of heaven is if you're born again. Born again through the sex acts, born again through the woman's womb. It's clear as day what it's talking about. So Solomon, soul of man, Solomon, sun, sun and moon is what it's talking about. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more as we go. But as I said before, you have to pay attention to when they're giving you stuff. So TV always is telling you stuff clear as day. So remember the show, the TV show, Third Rock from the Sun. What was the main character's name? Have you ever seen the show? What was his name? His name was Dick Solomon. That was his name, Dick Solomon. It's giving it to you clear as day. Dick Solomon, Third Rock from the Sun, is giving you sun. That's what it's talking about. Pay attention to the other guy's name. Their last name was Solomon, but their first name had to deal with something, which is another name for a penis, when you really pay attention. All of it was so many esoteric episodes in that TV show. People started to catch on, but the show was basically about reincarnation, the sun. His name was Dick Solomon. Come on. They gave it away. But you also have the island of Solomon. This is an island called Solomon, and it's owned by the British. That newspaper is called The Sun. It's the Sun newspaper. And it's so many things that we can point to that's giving you what Solomon really is when you pay attention to it. So this is just a few of them, but it's important to understand that when we get into all this stuff, and in Freemasonry, I don't care what you studying, Freemasonry, Shriners, so on and so forth, the esoteric meaning at its core has to do with the sun, has to do with sex, has to do with energy. So understand that first before you jump into some kind of initiation to some shit that's going to have you messed up. You don't need it. You need to follow your people. Follow what's already yours. Follow your history. Everybody want to jump into these Masonic shit and Shriners, and you don't need this stuff. Follow your people stuff. Follow your history. Everything is right there. This is what they're copying it from. This is where they stole it from. So the Bible, important key to getting to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. So when you're reading it, as I said, it's really important to do so you can figure this stuff out. You're going to pick up stuff like this. So anybody who knew about this stuff, that's on an esoteric level, when they read in First Kings, they're like, well, wait a minute, I know what this is, and you can see it. It's important to know these stories, which is why I go through them so you can get this stuff. So now I'm about to bust up a whole other thing with this King Solomon crap. They used our people's history to basically, create this false nonsense with the Ark of the Covenant. And after doing that, they're also going to use King Solomon and all this other garbage to basically sucker the people of Ethiopia into believing that they have some kind of part in this whole thing. So one of the things that happens, as I said, Solomon becomes famous. And Queen of Sheba, Makede, comes to visit him, and she brings a whole bunch of spices. The Bible says that nobody ever bought spices the like of Queen Sheba, since she left. She bought spices, and she bought a bunch of gold, and she came with a bunch of questions for King Solomon. They exchanged questions and everything like that, and he supposedly answered her questions to her satisfaction. And supposedly he gave her gifts and everything like that, and then she left, and that was the end of it. Now Queen Sheba will be the queen of Ethiopia. Now, talked about before about the Aksum Empire in Ethiopia. You have Rome coming in there, basically them and the Aksumite king converting the people to Christianity. And this is one of the reasons why. It's because of this story. So understand, it's many different stories when it comes to this. So as I just told you, this is what the Bible is basically saying. Sheba, she comes in, asks questions, they exchange gifts, that's it, she leaves. But it's another story that Queen Sheba comes, and the Queen of Sheba comes, Makede, however you want to pronounce her name, and she stays the night. And Solomon supposedly tells her, you can stay, just don't steal shit. Which is crazy. Like, she's going to steal. She came and just bought you a shitload of gold. What is she going to take? So supposedly in the middle of the night, she got thirsty. She goes to get water, and she let me get some water. Now supposedly they have sex, and she has a baby, and that baby, if you know the story, is supposedly Menelik the First. Now, story goes, depending on which one you take, Menelik the First, he goes to Solomon, and he has the ring. Now, forgot to tell you that part. When Sheba leaves, Solomon gives her a ring, so basically everything's cool, take this ring. So when Menelik comes back, he brings the ring, and he basically says to Solomon, I'm your son. Here's that ring, I'm your son. And Solomon basically doesn't acknowledge him as a son, basically fuck out of here, I ain't your daddy, and so on and so forth. So Menelik, the first, being upset, he gets some of his men, and he goes and he steals the Ark of the Covenant from Solomon. And they bring the Ark of the Covenant into Elephantine, Egypt, but a war breaks out and they eventually bring the Ark back to Ethiopia. So you have people say that they came into the Aksum Empire and suppose they had the Ark of the Covenant, and the only thing that was in it was supposedly wood. It's supposed to be from the original Ark of the Covenant. Because another part of the story goes that Solomon got wind of this and he basically switched the Ark out and put a fake Ark in there.